Hi crafty friends, it's Jarle here. Thank you so much for joining me again. Today I have a super simple card I wanted to share with you all. You don't need that many supplies to create this stunning little scene. I started by trimming down my Bristol Smooth cardstock to 5.5 by 4.25. I also added a little pencil mark there at the middle of the longer edge of my panel so I could make sure the scene would be centered. I added a little bit of temporary adhesive on the back of my panel and I placed it on my Make Art station. Then I took out this gorgeous two-piece stencil from Lawn Fawn called Beach Sunset. I have to say I was amazed by how easy it is to make a beautiful scene with just these two stencils. I lined up that stencil with the sun just in the middle. That's why I placed that tick mark there on that long edge earlier. I did want the sun a bit on the top half of my panel so I could still create my ocean and a sandy border later. As you can see, I did mask off any open gaps on the stencil so I wouldn't have ink where I didn't want it. I used the white Heavy Doodle masking tape for this. Then I took out my oxides in squeezed lemonade and mustard seed. I started with the lightest, which is the squeezed lemonade there on the left, to fill in the whole sun. Now I did want the edges to be slightly darker, so I went in with mustard seed just right there on the edges. These two shades of yellow gave the sun the color that I wanted. I pulled off and I cleaned my stencil before going on to the next portion of my card, which was the ocean. So I masked off that sun with the stencil and a strip of Heavy Doodle tape again to start on my ocean. I chose the colors Salvaged Patina, Salty Ocean and Prize Ribbon. In the end, you won't really notice the prize ribbon, but I did want to include it in this video. Just because it's a very nice blue combination of oxides, just perfect for ocean scenes. So I started blending my lightest color, the Salvaged Patina, on my panel. And then I went in with the medium color, which was the Salty Ocean. And I just went back and forth between those two colors. In the end, I also added a little bit of that prize ribbon, but it's just a matter of going back and forth between the different colors just to get the blending right. And as always, the Bristol Smooth cardstock is absolutely perfect for all your blending purposes. When I was happy with my blending, I splattered on some clear water and I blotted it off with a paper towel. This gave my ocean that nice texture and it just seems more realistic this way, I think. So I cleaned my stencil once again and I removed that little tick mark. And then it was time to add that beautiful reflection of the sun. So I just placed my stencil on top of the ocean, right where I wanted that reflection. And I went over it with squeezed lemonade. You could of course also use a darker shade of blue if you want to, but I really like that yellow reflection with the lemonade ink. And as always, I masked off any open spaces with my masking tape. This is beautiful. All you really need here is just this stencil and some inks, and you get beautiful results. Now, I didn't want my sky to be that stark white, so I did went in with a light blue ink color. I chose the tumbled glass because this is, for me, a perfect color for a very soft blue sky. I didn't mask anything here, I just made sure to keep the most of the color right on the edges, and I blended it in more towards the sun. And look at this. The white border around the sun is actually quite nice, I think. It has that sort of halo effect. I really, really like it. So on to my beach now. I die cut a hillside border out of Lawn Fawn craft cardstock. I place my craft cardstock right next to my blended panel just to decide how high or how low I wanted my sandy border to be. Now, to work with the rest of the panel, it needed some extra ink. So I went in with Vintage Photo Distress Oxide on the edges. I think this must be my favorite way to create a beach. So starting with craft cardstock and then inking a bit of Vintage Photo on top. But you could also start from a white cardstock and then blend in antique linen and Vintage Photo. That also creates that beachy vibe. Now, to create that sandy look, I also added in some splatters. I take a bit of Copic white and I dilute it with some water and I splatter it all around that border. And then I just do the same with the Vintage Photo. I put some ink on a stamping block, add some water and I tap the paint splatters onto the border. This really does look like sand, doesn't it? I really, really like how it looks. It's super realistic, I think. Then I die cut a stitched rectangle frame out of plain white cardstock. I wanted to frame this panel a little bit. But first I need to add the palm trees, because you know, every beach needs palm trees, right? So I laid down my sandy border and the frame just so I would know where my palm trees had to go. And when I knew where I was gonna place the palm trees, I removed the border and the frame and then I inked up the tree. So I actually went in with ground espresso for this. It's a slightly darker ink than the Vintage Photo. It does need to be that darker color, I think, just to cover up the ocean. I also did go in very heavy-handed here. I cleaned my stencil once again and then I decided where I wanted the green foliage to be. I did add masking tape again, just as you can see here, to make sure I didn't get excessive ink anywhere. I'm such a messy inker, I would totally ruin the panel if I didn't mask off those open spaces. For that foliage or leaves, I don't know how you call that, I went in with Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink, and again slightly heavy-handed here as well. And this finishes off one palm tree. Off camera I inked up a second tree on the right, but then I screwed up. You see that little splotch right there on the right? That's because I cleaned up my stencil with a little bit of water, but then I forgot to blot off the excess water, and this created that nasty little stain. So I was thinking, how can I manage to salvage it, because the scene was quite ready. So I took out my border and I saw that it's just above that sand there. So I thought, why not put a strategically placed coconut there? Coconuts fall off palm trees all the time, right? So I placed my stencil on that stain and I inked up a coconut there. And this fixes my mistake just perfectly. And to finish off my scene, I did add 3 little birds with some black soot. This just ties it all together. I really love how it's turning out, even with strategically placed coconuts. With my tape runner, I adhered my sandy border onto my panel. And for the frame, I chose to foam mount it with heavy doodle foam strips. So I added strips all around my frame, peeled off the liner paper and adhered the frame onto my panel. But now I wasn't quite happy with that white frame, so I decided to die cut another frame, and this time out of sticky note cardstock. I put some liquid glue on the back and then adhered it on top of that white frame. And I like this much more than the white. And actually, you really don't need to add anything else to this scene. I mean, this already looks amazing. For a moment, I really thought about leaving it as is. But I did want to add one little image, the little bunny from the Better Days stamp set, combined with a speech balloon and sentiment from the pool party set. Now, to add some interest to my scene, I decided to add some white gel pen details to the background panel. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing here. I just place a few dots here and there until I'm quite happy with how it looks. On the coconut, I also added three dark brown dots with the Copic marker, and this gave that coconut a little bit of texture. I will list down all my Copic markers that I used for this card. I will list those below. Now, to adhere my images, I used foam squares for my bunny and then for that speech balloon as well. And I also placed them a little bit on the left of my scene. I really didn't want to add anything else because I wanted the focus to be on that gorgeous background. Off camera, I put my whole panel on a white top-folded card base. I'm so in love with this card. It really looks like a teeny tiny painting and it was super easy to do. Just that one stencil pack has tons of possibilities. So thank you so much, crafty friends, for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye.